Ladies and one gentleman, welcome to Ladies Beyond Flying, and especially Happy New Year, Healthy New Year. I wish everybody successful and certainly a nice 2022. My name is Daniel Stecher. I'm Vice President Airline Operations, IBS Software, and today is the very first Aviation Women Panel 2022. It will be an amazing year for our Ladies Beyond Flying Aviation Women Panel series. And today we have a second male guest speaker from Sunexpress. It's Peter Glade, who is answering us fantastic questions, hopefully, or finding answers on three main questions. And so for the logistics, ladies, please raise your hand if you have a question, because we want to have a very lively discussion. I will help Peter if I see too many raised hands from all of you. And I wish us amazing time now with Peter, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm trying to get this working here. Can't see myself. Anyway, so yeah, welcome to 2022. This seems to be a good year of possibilities, open minds, and tolerance if it starts with old white man presenting for Ladies Beyond Flying. So thank you for having me. It's a good start in 2022 for me. It's my second presentation today that I'm giving. The first was a speech in front of the mayor of Izmir. He had invited all airlines that have flights to Izmir to a big function with press, and everybody in the city was there. And I literally, prior to the beginning of the speech, bent down to get my papers out of my bag, and my pants cracked in front of everybody. So I'm very, very happy to have this presentation here in seating with the camera just going up here. The title of the presentation, I said that 2022 was going to be a decisive year for the aviation industry. And I mean it. I think really 2022 is going to be a year in which many airlines will have to take decisions that will characterize their way forward for years and probably even a decade in advance. Aviation pre-corona per se was not the most profitable business. Right? In 2019, so pre-corona, IATA said that the net gross margin of the aviation industry was 3.2%. That's nothing. If you look at Stern's NYC business reports, the last ones, banks, net profit margin 31%, soft drinks 14%, even cable TV, which is a thing of the past, still had a net profit of 35.79%. For many air carriers, the net margin that we make when we sell sandwiches during low season on board of our flights is higher than what we make on the average ticket value that we're selling. Just looking at net profit margin. And that was pre-corona numbers. So during the course of the pandemic, what did airlines do? They significantly saved on cost. A lot of them took a lot of means to reduce their cost base. But at the same time, in many cases, they only deferred payments, postponed payments to later years. So huge maintenance events that all planes have to go through, that all major airlines will have to put their planes through, right? You postponed them to the latest possible moment in time where it was still safe to operate the flight and legal. You negotiated different payment terms with your leasing providers. Anything that you could postpone, any payment that you could postpone to what we back then believed was post-corona times, you try to shift as much as possible. At the same time, many carriers, many airlines had to go to their governments, or at least to commercial banks, and ask for money. Now, most of the governments, and I would say all of the commercial banks, are actually asking interest for that. All of that will be burdening cash levels and balance sheets of many airlines in 2022. Because we will have those events, we cannot postpone them anymore. Planes simply have to go into maintenance. That fleet rollover that you've been planning to do for years now is adamant that you're actually really doing it. Some of the financiers, they will throw fresh money after the old one. Yes, there's a lot of cash out there. And what, average profit margin of 3.2%? I would say the older of us will remember there was a time then when you were actually getting that, when you were putting your money on the bank. Looking at some of the videos here that I'm seeing, some of the ladies, that was before you were actually born, but we believe that those times will come back, that you actually get interest for your money. And what we're seeing, what the Fed is currently doing and what the ECB is thinking about, it could be the end of zero interest, of zero interest times. But still, money is out there, and some investment banks might be interested in putting more money even into the aviation sector. But for many airlines, they will have to start paying back their debt. They will have to face the fact that they will not be able to push forward a lot of the things that they've been postponing, a lot of the cash out that they've postponing much longer. At the same time, we see major cost increases in all major cost blocks for 2022. If you look at the large cost blocks of an airline, what is it? Number one, for most airlines, it's taxes, fees, and airport charges. Which government is there anywhere in the world that after Corona or during Corona will say, you know what, now I will lower my taxes? If there's one thing that truly unites the world, it's the fact that most governments are broke nowadays. And then the aviation industry, for most of the governments, is not the industry where they say, hey, if I'm going to do a tax cut, that's the first industry I'm thinking about. Maybe for very tourism-prone countries, that might be a thing. But at the same time, you've got the green movement where it's not really sexy to do a tax cut for airlines or lower the aviation fees. They have infrastructure cost for running ATC, for running airports. And what they will need to do, because they can't lower it that fast, especially when you have bureaucrats at work, what they will do is they will simply divide that cost by the diminished number of flights that we will be seeing and make things more expensive. And we've seen it. In Turkey, the ATC is 50% more expensive than last year. We're seeing it with most ATC providers around the world. Next big cost block is kerosene, fuel. There's always the political dimension that you cannot foresee. What's happening with OPEC? What is the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the world going to be next year? All of that aside, the simple fact that in Europe, the green movement is gaining importance in a lot of governments, and the German government being the most prominent latest example, will lead to an increase in fuel price in general. And then the problem is kerosene is actually one of the dirtiest forms that you can do with crude oil. So for the oil producing companies to reduce their CO2 emission and their footprint, their carbon footprint, and for them to be able to move towards the 1.5 degree centigrade goal, Paris goal, it's easy for them if they produce less kerosene. It's actually way in the right direction. So taxes most likely increasing, fuel most likely increasing, and with inflation looming in many parts of the world, I'm not really convinced that we will see a huge break on HR cost and on labor cost. And I'm yet to meet the airline employee that said, I worked like crazy for 2 years to save the company, saved a lot of my private income through short-time work, etc. And now I'm happy to stay with my lower salary. So if we're looking at the large cost blocks that influence an airline's balance sheet, cost increases will come. And at the same time, postponed cash events will happen in 2022. So for me, I'm very convinced that the landscape that we will see at the end of 2022 will be a different one than what we're entering in the year with. And I'm thinking about mergers and acquisitions, and I'm thinking about market exits. Don't forget that in good years, 2018, 2019, when things were okay for the industry, we had one airline bankruptcy per week. One airline bankruptcy per week. And we will see a faster pace in 2022. That's at least my prediction. So if the year is going to be such a decisive year, what are the questions that we need to answer as an industry? For me, the first question is going to be, what do I want to be? Do I want to be the prey, or do I want to be the predator? Now, after Christmas break, to talk about food probably doesn't feel right, at least not for me. But really, and airlines in 2022 will need to have an answer to that question. Is my niche lucrative and protected enough for me to stay in that niche? Who might consider me a prey by attacking my niche or going directly after my business? Airlines will be fighting for survival. And I don't know if you've seen, I don't know if you have pets, and if you have a cat and a dog as pets at home, and they don't like each other, and from time to time they fight. Yeah, that's a fight, and that's the fight that we've had as airlines in many parts of the world. Yes, we're fighting and we're competing. I was in Etosha a few years back, and I saw a zebra fighting against a lion. That's the kind of fighting that we will see when airlines fight for survival. Big parts of the business that we are used to will not come back, or at least not come back fast enough. So if you're looking at business travel, that will take time to recover in many parts of the world. And even when it recovers, it's not going to come back to pre-crisis levels. So airlines that have been depending on that business field, on this business segment, will need to look into different markets. And they will look after your niche, after our niches, after what you thought was your well-deserved right to just serve this market. Some countries will recover faster from COVID-19 than others. Some markets will be recovering faster. And you need to see whether will you be the predator that needs to attack, or will you be considered prey by airlines that will come in either as new entrants with cheap planes currently available, cheap labor currently available, financing available, and they're the new guys that kick the old guys that have all the finance burden, all the planes, all the old planes, leasing contracts on the back, or by old incumbents that are looking for new markets to ensure their survival. So for me, every airline, and this is something that really in the beginning of the year, a decision that you need to take within your management part is, will you be a prey or will you be a predator? Because just duck and hide is not going to work in 2022 because there's too few passengers out. There will be too few passengers out there for far too much capacity. Second question, I would say that we need to discuss and we need to answer is, now, how do I make my money? Where is my revenue actually going to come from? So what do I mean with that? I've talked a bit about the cost side. Let's look globally on the revenue side. Airlines in the past were differentiated by the quality of planning, right? We're very asset heavy. I don't know, narrow body, 150 to 200 seater that stands around on the apron costs you just to have it, what, $250K a month, roughly. Plus the upfront payments that you have to do. So if you go to your banks, if you want to go to raise cash, you need to be sure that you know exactly which markets you're going to be serving. Airlines were priding themselves to be the best, have the best predictions of their seat load factor for their planes in what, 5 years. When I started at Lufthansa in 1997, they still were doing a 10 years long-term strategic planning. What's 10 years now? Corona has forever changed that. Without sharing any business secret, Sunexpress has received 50% of their bookings in high season, less than 2 weeks prior to takeoff. And with EU 267, this law on customer compensation, have to pay €450. As an airline flying to Turkey, it's €450 if I cancel a flight less than 2 weeks in advance, even if the people have only paid €39 for the ticket. My revenue managers usually had the cutoff date to decide, am I going to fly that flight or am I not going to fly that flight? The latest one was 14 plus 1 days in advance, so that we still had a time to not be paying EU 261 compensation. Now we're getting 50% of our bookings in the last 2 weeks. So the entire planning logic, the entire revenue management logic, anything that an airline was proud of, you can basically throw it out of the window and start completely new. Now, the one thing that is actually decisive is agility. Being able to replan your operation within a few days or within a few hours. We've seen it that when markets were opening up, so when governments decided to let go of PCR tests or when simply the borders were opened, we had the first flights from out of North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the state with the highest population in Germany and with the highest German-Turkish population. We are a VFR company, half German, half Turkish. Our entire flight offer for the first week, and that was up to 3 daily flights from all major airports, filled up to a seat load factor of over 90% within less than 48 hours for the entire first week after the borders were open. And then you have to put in capacity, and you have to be very, very fast in putting in this capacity. In Sunexpress, we doubled our available seat kilometers. So we doubled our offer last year between May and June. Then we doubled it again between June and July. And in August, we were already flying record flight numbers. In the entire 30 years history of Sunexpress, we've never flown more. Now, that is great from a commercial standpoint. That is agility as we love it to have. But if I was working in maintenance planning or in crew planning, or if I was the poor, pilot that was getting the 7th revision of its work roster, I would hate myself for that. But agility and the way to produce agile is the name of the game. And that will have an impact on every system and every process that an airline uses. As a CCO, I can carry the word agility in front of me all the time. But my CFO has to go to the banks and tell them, look, those 36 737s that you're still picking up in Seattle, we need financing for that. And the banks are asking, so what is your business plan for it? And what's the proof that you can actually do that business plan? And whereas for in the past years, an airline would present them seat load factors, destinations, etc. for the next years, we will now be showing them that we are faster than anybody else as soon as opportunities arise, because we have open architecture systems, because we have flexible IT landscapes, etc., and a flexible workforce. You have to have built a lot of credibility with your financiers, with your banks, and even with your CFO, if I may say so, to run that case. But that's what's going to happen, and we will see that more than ever in 2022. Proof being, I've just done the study, there's never been more capacity in VFR markets than in 2022. Because every airline is moving into VFR markets now, or visiting friends and relatives markets, because business travel isn't there. Holiday travel may come or may not come, but people who live somewhere in a remote place want to travel home, full stop. So if that is all happening on the revenue side, what you need to do is you need to, and you're coming from an industry that, where, like I said in the beginning, in a good year, made a 3.2% profit margin. What we all need to do is we need to see what we can do above and beyond to still convince the finance world of the viability of providing cash to us, and the shareholders of the viability to keep their investments. And if we don't have those answers, we will be a bunch of state-owned carriers in the end that fly on government contract. At Sunexpress, we have invested in a complete new IT infrastructure. We've basically exchanged the majority of our classical airline systems through retail systems, and we've significantly invested in our retail capacity. We've been able, within the crisis, to double our spend per passenger actually a little more than double, spend per passenger on non-air related services. So it's really about rethinking the business model. Our customers fly with us on average 1.5 times per year. So let's round it up to 2. So maybe 6 days a year they're thinking about Sunexpress. That means that there's 359 days in the year where they don't think about spending money at Sunexpress. So maybe Michael O'Leary wasn't wrong at all with his vision that, at least for short and medium haul flights, tickets will eventually be for free, and we'll make our money just on retail. That's just one vision, but there's so much revenue that as an airline we could, should, and would be doing. But in our blood is kerosene, and many of us think that what we should be doing as ancillaries is taking services away from our customers and then selling them back to them. There's much more that we can do. I've seen that we've had a first question. Daniel, if you help me with that.
Björn, you want to ask it verbally, or you? Yeah, he's asking verbally.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. And I was just wondering, like, how has the collaboration changed between commercial departments and operations departments at Sunexpress? Since you said like the pace is so fast now, like it has changed. The booking periods are so short, like 2 weeks. You said, like, do you have new like methods of collaborating with each other? New, like, I don't know, weekly meetings or whatever?
When I started, there was no meetings at all between operations and commercial, and it felt a little bit like the two departments are not allowed to talk to each other. So we started off with a monthly jour fixe. That was already groundbreaking, and that was 6 years ago. During the summer period of 2021, when we were already flying again record, or when we were knowing that we needed to have a record operation. Starting May last year, we would have 2 meetings per day on an quick expert group. What has changed, what has not changed? A larger meeting once per week, with a bit of a broader audience to say what has been the booking income, what is likely to go out, what is likely to stay in, what are the largest regulatory changes that we have experienced, and what are we still expecting. And then there was of course, still the monthly jour fixe where, the director colleagues and the board members, etc. met. But really, collaboration, and a complete new decision set. Because in commercial, you own the flights until what, 72 hours prior to departure. Then we hand it over to operations. And operations, of course, has their way of thinking about which flight do they operate, which flight do they not operate. We completely remodeled those parameters and gave them completely different algorithms how to take those decisions. So, prey or predator? Is my niche secured enough to survive? Who will attack me? Who might attack me? And how do I make my revenue stream a lot more stable than what it used to be, outside of the extremely uncertain development within the airline industry or within airline? That's the second question. How do I actually make my money? And the third one that I believe we will need to answer in 2022 is, what do we actually mean when we're talking sustainability? And that is a bit of a change now, because we're moving out of the pure commercial world. So many people have talked about sustainability in aviation over the last few days, weeks, months, even years. There's been bright speeches, great rhetoric, but what do we actually mean with it? What is it that we as an industry want to be measured by? Do we narrow sustainability as an industry down to environmental matters? That's fair enough. And coming from the green movement, there will be a lot of pressure on this industry. And if I may add personally, rightfully so. But do we as industry drive that, and every airline individually in their countries, in the legislation where they have power to change things? Are we seen as trusted advisors to to decision makers? Or are we seen as entities that when we have the opportunity for short-term profit improvement, we rather take that than really answering sustainability? If we do not manage to gain trust, and at least for Central Europe, this is a question for the EU, this is a question that will be decided within the next 12 months. If we do not gain enough trust that we are really, truly changing aviation industry to become greener, decisions will be taken for us. Irreversible decisions that will impact our business models if we like it or not. Will we drive or will we be driven? And this is only the question about environment. Climate action is one of the 17 sustainability goals that the UN defined. And what about the 16 others? Gender equality? How many airlines are run by women? What's the percentage currently? Decent work? Do you have control where the blanket that you give to your passengers when they're cold has been produced and whether that is child labor or not? Not many airlines know that. These are just a few examples. Again, out of the 17 targets, I think the environmental question is going to be the one most pressing. And if we don't give good answers as an industry within the next year, things will happen to us and not with us. So that's basically my 3 questions that I think every airline needs to answer. And even in the sequence of having to answer them. Prey or predator? What's my niche? Am I protected? Do I need to grow out of my niche? How will I earn my money? How will I earn my revenue? What is my planning? What is my answer to agility? And lastly, what do we mean when we say sustainability? That's the 3 questions for 2022, at least in my humble opinion, as Chief Commercial Officer for a small or mid-sized airline in a remote part of the world, which is Turkey and Germany. Daniel, you said I should plan for 30 minutes presentation, and for the first time in history, I stuck to what you said.
It's amazing. Yeah, but that's why we invited you, because we want to set a new standard in Aviation Women panel with our guest speakers, and I think you set the bar very high. No, but I think that was a very insightful presentation. What I like very much was when you said airlines have to rethink the business model. I think that's really key. And do you see a reason why airlines could maybe struggle? Is it easy for all the airlines to rethink their business model, or is there something that what you said earlier, not just one airline per week will fade away? Is the rethinking of the business model key for everything?
Yes. Yes, it is key, and yes, it is extremely difficult to change it. Why? Number one, because changing a business model of an airline is a huge change project. And change never happens fast, but we are under a lot of pressure. And at the same time, if I look at my team, they've just run a 100K extreme marathon. This is what I think the entire industry thinks about the last 2 years. Everything changed all the time, new rules, worked through the nights, and everything that you've just put into the systems, you had to redo it 48 hours because some government put up a new way of thinking about the pandemic. And now they're lying behind the finish line, pumping for breath, and you're coming around and say, hey, now let's run a 10K. And they're looking at you and they're saying, no, what I want is I want to be back in normal. I want normal back. And my motto that I'm giving to my team for 2022, we always have a commercial motto of the year. And our motto for 2022 is everything will remain different. It's the hugest change project that this industry will need to go through. Under time pressure, under a lot of external pressure, and with some financial burdens that we simply have and some long-term duties that we just need to fulfill. I mean, we've got those planes, we've got those leasing contracts. As an industry, we're doomed to growth. There's no other way for an airline to survive but to grow. Yes, it's difficult and it's going to be a challenge.
Is there a question from the audience?
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Hi. I have a question. I'm curious. You said something about state-owned carriers, and I wonder. I've been in the industry a long time. I'm in Canada, and I see where there is a need in this vast country, in the north, particularly for the aviation industry. There's a saturation in the border with the United States. When you say exhaustion, oh my God, I feel you. I'm a pilot. I've been working through the whole industry, or I beg your pardon, through the whole COVID experience. And I wonder whether there is, whether the airlines imagine, or whether you imagine a time where there is re-regulation, if you will, that the governments who have taken, many governments have taken a share in their airlines, whether they re-regulate them, whether that's something that the population imagines, I'm thinking from a customer experience. What do they want? Are they willing to pay more? You talk about paying nothing for a seat and upselling. Is that where we're going? That makes no sense to me. But I'm old and set in my ways.
What I've seen is that the French government has introduced a ecological tax, to phrase it easily, for all French airlines. And Air France has now increased their prices generally. I'm oversimplifying. That just happened today or yesterday, and I'm really interested to see whether that will lead to higher prices or just a smaller market share for Air France, especially on connecting flights. Do I see an opportunity for the airline industry to raise prices? I've just attended one conference where a speaker from SAS had the original price list from the very first flight between Oslo and New York, and it was exactly the same amount of Norwegian krona than today. So basically 50 years of inflation, just gone.
Right.
Do I think that this is going to change? No way, because unfortunately there's still too many players in the market, and people are willing to pay more for the taxi ride to the airport than for the actual 4 hours flight to their summer holiday. Why that is so, I have no idea. We've gone wrong somewhere as an industry in not being able to make our product, which is so sexy, being sought for. So maybe one airline comes up with the Nespresso idea. Why are we paying 75 euro cent for one capsule of coffee? If I take filter coffee, it's less than 2 cents, because I feel like George Clooney if I do it. Maybe one airline ever. That's so funny. You say George Clooney and everybody smiles in the camera. But maybe an airline comes up with something like that. Other than that, I don't really see how we will be seeing more higher prices. Your other question about the regulation, I actually see that risk that we're coming back to regulation, because some of the countries, and I'm looking more at developing countries, they're seeing that we have a problem with supply chains, and they need to make sure that they have enough access to their main cities also on the airway or on the air path. And if they don't protect their national airline, they don't have that. And I'm very, very closely following all the studies on the Balkan situation, with Adria Airways going out of business. So you see Ljubljana without a state-owned airline currently, whereas Zagreb has one. Montenegrin government decided to put a new state airline in because they saw that there was not enough capacity to Podgorica. So I'm really looking at that very, very closely, because I think that's going to be interesting to see what's happening there and what this means for protection of national carriers.
It's really it's fascinating, and I put in the chat that there's many opportunities. For me, low cost is an oxymoron in the aviation industry. You talked about 3.2%. That seems like a high profit margin in the aviation industry. And you know, if you it's supply and demand. But we've marketed that it's like getting on a bus or maybe a train in Canada, right? Getting on an airplane is now like getting on a bus. You know, 50 years ago it was an elite, you know, you talk about visiting friends and family, VFR, visiting friends and family or relatives. That's where the market was with the upscale business passenger. Yeah, I think agile is a very interesting word when you mention that, and I don't know how you get agile into my end of the equation, which is from the from the pilots. You know, I've seen wages being driven down for pilots in the industry to you know, an unsustainable level. And yeah, I don't know how they work around seven changes per day. I'm going crazy just thinking about it. Anyways, I've taken up enough time. Thank you.
And you have a question.
Oh, yes, thank you. And also, Peter, very, very good presentation. Absolutely excellent. Thank you. My name is Anne. I work as a consultant in aviation. A couple of sorry.
You do distribution. I've read your articles.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do distribution. Yes, a couple of well, one observation. I think that part of our problem in airline industry, in the airline industry, is that we went. We have the emerging LCCs with a phenomenal business model, and doing extremely well, and they. And I remember actually working for a full service network airline at the time, and everyone was saying, "Oh, forget about Ryanair. Oh, it's never going to, it's never going to matter, and it's all so insignificant, and la da 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 da." And all of a sudden, 120 million passengers later. And then we kind of changed everything, didn't we? I mean, every carrier was doing their own sort of concept of competing low cost. So what we did to the passenger was we were actually educating them that they didn't have to pay those elite prices, that we mentioned. They've been overpaying for everything for so long. So I think that's part of the problem. But I wanted to ask you, why do you think, I mean, I'm a strong advocate of retail, and I've been talking about retail for years. And I got a giggle out of IATA renaming NDC into retail. Why? And of course, I know the profit margins, and I work with offer and order management systems, and I know how much money there is in there, and I've worked for a low cost airline as well. Why is the inability there? Why is it so difficult for full service carriers to understand these profit margins? Like, they can be up to 40%. What's the real reason? Or you don't know the real answer either, but what's so difficult for them to see?
For me, it's two answers to that question. Question number one is that we've decided to become airliners, to become retailers. Think it the other way around. A supermarket owner decides to be an airline. Yeah. So you're walking into the supermarket the next day, the entire floor is empty, and all the merchandise is stuffed into the last corner into some aircraft trolleys. And the guy who's checking you out at the cashier is now wearing a shiny uniform and says, "I've decided to become an airline." That's not working. You need to bring fresh, you have to bring fresh expertise in there. You have to bring outside people in that know how to do retail. Yeah. My last intern, I was working for Austrian Airlines before, and the last intern that I had after that did an internship at Red Bull. And we talked, and he said, look, Red Bull knows 70 seconds after a person has entered a supermarket, whether that person is going to buy a can of Red Bull or not. We've got people 4.5 hours locked into a narrow little aluminium, and if they're sitting on the wrong seat, we don't even know their name. We don't have the knowledge, and we have to admit we don't have a knowledge. We know how to do flying, and we do it perfectly, but we have no clue about retailing. That's the one thing. And the second thing is we're using systems that were never meant to do this. Yeah. So even when, if we're missing human brain, we can't even replace it through artificial intelligence because you're using systems that have never been made for this. And maybe a third thing, it's still far more interesting for board members to discuss which of the planes they're going to buy to fly to which exotic destination than to discuss the right amount of ham on a ham and cheese sandwich, even though the ham and cheese sandwich might be driving their profitability more.
That is so funny. That is exactly what I said Sunday afternoon when I had to explain, this problem. And that's actually what I said, that the small boys love their planes and trains, and they still love that operational side of the airline business. They love the planes, but they certainly don't want to discuss retail, do they? Thanks for that. That was a great answer.
You have a question.
Yeah, hi, Peter. I work in India. So what I was wondering was, while you were talking a lot about how a lot of these airlines may start just going down, how the costs are going higher, how the liabilities of the airlines are going higher, I was wondering, in the same industry, especially in India, I would comment, that we're seeing newer airlines coming up because of the bulk deals that they are getting across different varieties, like the bulk aircraft deals or different investment opportunities that others are seeing. So what is your take on that about newer opportunities in the industry?
And India is has always been a very special aviation market. But on this, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, now is the right time to start an airline. And there's been very few times in the history where it was the right time. Currently, you get cheap labor, and especially in India, you even get trained labor from failed airlines in the past. Both in Seattle and in Toulouse, you get fantastic deals. At this point in time, there's still cash out there that helps you on the financing and some interest to invest in the airline business. And in the specific case of India, there's also a market there, a market opportunity there. In most other parts of the world, there's a lot of carriers that are currently struggling, so they could be very easily prey. And they could very easily be, driven out of the market. So if a billionaire now came around, usually I say the fastest way to become a millionaire is be a billionaire and start an airline. Now it could actually be the other way around, but it's a small window of opportunity. Maybe in India it's a bit larger, and you will have to see how the Indian administration, how the Indian government really thinks about equal opportunity for new startups versus the incumbent player.
True, I think that's what's really happening in terms of the manpower. We're getting the trained manpowers. The pilots were never available so much as of this time, where even the systems or the aircrafts, they're all available. And I see that that'll lead to a real good competition in the coming year ahead. So I think the existing airlines will have to spend more and more effort on redesigning the business, like you were mentioning earlier, how we need to remodel how we're doing things, how we need to evaluate every cost to then compete with newer players. So thanks for your questions. I think that really made a lot of sense in what we intend to do, even with the new competition coming in. Thank you.
Glad.
Are there further questions from the audience?
I may have one more question to the last of the three buckets that you showed before, Peter. You said that playing a role in sustainability will be and putting your place into the sustainability margin there is very crucial for this year. Do you see any, maybe also out of your role in the commercial part of Sunexpress, do you see any very specific link on where, as an airline, it's good to step in and into this part of making aviation more sustainable? Or what are your thoughts about this fact?
Number one, I think we have to be honest and stop greenwashing. Introducing a green cabin and saying we're not using plastic on cabin anymore, it's not changing the CO2 footprint at all. And it's killing our credibility with anybody that really knows what's happening. I think that's the very, very first step. We have to acknowledge that we're part of the problem, but we have to make sure that everybody knows that we also want to be part of the solution. I think we have to have the discussion publicly with stakeholders that if you want and if we need to change the way that we work, live, and do business, we are risking peace and prosperity if we cut on the link between countries and people. Plus, if we have and we have to have that discussion, how fast can we transform this industry? How fast can we transform this industry versus how fast can we change our CO2 footprint? The entire amount of sustainable aviation fuel that is currently available worldwide, if you pumped all of that into just the planes of Lufthansa, it would cover for your transatlantic operations for 1 week. And that's it. So to say sustainable aviation fuel is the solution, it's probably right, but it's only going to be a solution in a certain amount of time. And we have to be realistic in the targets that we set, because everything else will have a detriment to mobility worldwide. Do I have all the answers? I don't. But I know that if we don't start being very honest and open about things, we'll have people managing us that don't know anything about the business.
Monowara, you have a question?
Peter, this is Manwara from Toronto, Canada. Very good presentation. Really enjoyed. Real good information. Who's your biggest competitor?
Biggest competitor would be Pegasus, Turkish low-cost carrier.
Okay.
And then a second airline, which is called, it's still not known, but don't worry, you'll be running around hearing from it, unfortunately, over the next few years. It's called Corendon. It's a Dutch-Turkish airline. They're not that big yet, but they make a case out of flying every route that we are flying to.
Okay. Thank you. Good to know.
Fatima, you want to ask a question verbally?
Well, yes, I put the question on the chat, but yes, I just wanted to know what is the real load factor for passengers and cargo among Frankfurt, Munich, Berlin, and Istanbul? Is there any, I mean, now after, or let's say, during pandemic period, the high pandemic period, that's what I said.
I can't answer because Sunexpress is the largest Turkish carrier outside of Istanbul. We fly everywhere in Turkey except for Istanbul. But I can give you a broader answer to this. The load factor, the average load factors that we were running during 2021 was 82%.
Okay. Thank you. That would be important. So for now, at this point, you can't answer the one I asked you for now, because it's a broader one. It's important because you're not flying to Istanbul, so you can't answer.
No, I wouldn't know. Okay. And on cargo, for those of you who know, we're flying 737-800, so cargo is not the biggest piece of
our one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Anyway, thank you.
So one last question. Anybody? So then, Peter, thank you very much. I think that was a fantastic kickoff for 2022. A lot of questions. I think that's also one of the best attended panels ever. I'm not amazed because having you on stage, I think it's almost a no-brainer that so many attendees will join. Interestingly, you have set the bar very high, as I said earlier, because now looking also in the future for the upcoming months, we will have Maya from Jet2 in February talking about launching a transatlantic route during the pandemic. We then continue with LATAM Airlines Group and Juliana talking about business transformation and digitization. I think also a great topic you were touching already, IT, in your presentation. Then we go to the African perspective. Ade Funke is talking about challenges and opportunities in the African aviation. Then in May, Raquel is talking about a sustainability topic, especially again from low-cost perspective. And I think that's a perfect lineup also for the upcoming months. And Peter, from now on, I hope you are joining maybe one or the other panel also as a guest. I think the audience enjoyed very much your company, and I wish all of us a fantastic rest of the day. Looking forward to have you soon with us again, and also please spread the word about Ladies Beyond Flying, because I believe it's one of the most inclusive and diverse communities in the world, because we also enable male attendees to present. Even we call Ladies Beyond Flying. So enjoy the rest of the day, and very important, please stay healthy and safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.